Government has a strategy on is mandatory quarantine, which they seem to want to limit and even delay bringing in. What's your take on that?
Well, we think that the bill that's gone through at the moment is like a half-assed bill, and it's going to take about 4 weeks for them to be able to implement it. In the meantime, thousands of people are coming into the country every day, and also the identification of 20-odd different countries that they want to exclude. But some of them are the countries where we've the least amount of inward travel. So some of the countries across Europe that aren't excluded, that can come and go without the mandatory quarantine, have very high rates of infection. And what we want to see is that there's mandatory quarantine for all travellers into the country.
Including those from Britain?
Yeah, and the bill doesn't do that. The bill doesn't do that at all. And we want to see that being implemented because...
what about essential workers, and what about people, say, bringing supplies into the country?
Obviously you have to do something for truck drivers, people bringing cargo, health workers, etc. And there is a way around that, and the bill actually provides a way around that as well. But in terms of the quarantine and of where they're coming from, it is a selective group of countries, and it will not deal with the real issue, and it will not get it will not do the trick that it's meant to do. It's also going to take 3 to 4 weeks before they can implement it. And we've passed legislation at the drop of a hat overnight, very quickly, complex legislation to ban evictions, to freeze rents and all the rest of it over the last year. But this particular measure, which we've been screaming at the government to implement, to stop non-essential travel and to quarantine all non-essential travel coming into the country, they're now bringing it in 10 months later, and they're doing it half-assed.
Why this approach?
That the bill is adopting, Damien, is the slowness with which it'll be implemented. Instead of saying, here's all the countries that we're not letting anyone in, and if there's a country that is a green, clean country, we look at that and change the regulatory order. But the regulatory order is working the other way around, and the minister is obliged by the legislation to study each country by country. It's going to be slow, cumbersome, and as I say, it's a half-assed attempt.
I want to move on. And what do you think, though, of the other things? That were announced last night? Are you happy with the measures for the slow reopening, such as the schools returning? I'm very concerned about the schools returning. I get it 100% how parents and kids and teachers feel about the need for school to be normalised and for people to go back. But I'm really concerned, and I'll tell you why, Matt. We've had 10 months since the pandemic started with the full knowledge that in our schools 80% of them aren't properly ventilated, for example, that we've the highest class sizes in Europe, that the sort of contact tracing that we use for children in schools is very different to the rest of society. So the sort of science that they're saying schools are safe hasn't actually proved to be true in reality. And schools are only safe when transmission in the community is low. And Minister, you can't say that transmission in the community is low now. It's not. On the one hand, you have NPHET saying it may be safe to go back to school, but please stay away from each other. Yeah. You can't reopen with tens of thousands of people moving around. And to be fair to Bríd, the conversation that our ventilation in the majority of schools is poor. They've had 10 months to address it, and they haven't done it. I asked Leo Varadkar last week, have you ensured that ventilation is going to be improved in the schools before the kids go back? And he couldn't answer me because they haven't done it. Now, that is very negligent to say on the one hand that we want the kids back, and we do want the kids back, we all want to see them back, but not to put the provisions in place is purely negligent. Yeah, and that's why I say you're gambling.
Yeah, to give Bríd some reassurance there has been a team working on the ventilation success of that as well.
Bríd,
but the ventilation is part of that conversation as well.
Look, I mean, I just think that they've been negligent and that this is a real gamble. Can I just say on the vaccines?
Very quickly,
people are really screaming, and today the family carers were hugely disappointed. There's a problem with supply, and we will appeal, I'm asking the Minister here now, for the Irish Government to support the motion before the World Trade Organization to lift and suspend all intellectual property rights on the production of vaccines, so that countries with industrial capacity can produce them without companies holding on to the intellectual property rights. And that would deal with supply, make it more efficient, make it quicker and make it cheaper for everybody, because it's a pandemic. By definition, it affects everybody on the planet, including those in the poorest sections of the world.
OK, we'll leave it there. Thanks very much to Paul.